The university is in crisis. Now, what frames all of this and our evening discussion, and this is the discussion I've been hoping to have all year, actually, is when we started Coöperism 1313. The plan was to figure out this most essential question. It comes down to how to transform a university. Because I think today three pests plague liberal arts higher education in the United States: donors, politicians, and university administrators. The donors, to whom the university are now beholden, and often apparently have no real commitment to the liberal arts or to critical thought, now dictate university policies. The trustees of the university have really transformed their function into a corporate board overseeing a corporate CEO. I mean, it's a completely different system and understanding and function of what a trustee does, right? Very much corporatized. Politicians, of course, have turned themselves into philosopher kings, dictating what history books to read, banning whole schools of thought, and meddling with the internal conversations on campus. And meanwhile, in kind of ever-growing inflated ranks of often good-meaning administrators and general counsel, some of whom are not necessarily steeped in the real culture of the liberal arts, are setting the agenda for budgets, but and also for liability reasons, right? In other words, they get to decide things because we are going to become liable for this or that. Like we might become liable apparently under Title VI. But of course, actually, our own administration conceded that we are in violation of Title VI this week, which is one of the most bizarre and unprecedented things I've ever heard in my life, of actually a party conceding that they are in violation of Title VI or of the law. Anyway, we all know what's really going on in a way. I think it boils down to a single statistic, which is persons with liberal arts educations are far more likely to vote for a Democratic candidate than for a Republican candidate. I think that's what's at the bottom of this all, and the attack on higher education. You just you can look at any statistic, any article, New York Times headline: college graduates are now a firmly Democratic bloc. They're shaping the party's futures. Those without degrees, by contrast, have flocked to Republicans. And so basically, I think that part of what's going on is that Republicans are really trying to kneecap higher education. And I think we have to understand what's going on here from that perspective. I think we also have to understand it in terms of the elections in 2024. And I think one of the major factors going on is that the Republicans, in part, right, Mike Johnson, Virginia Fox, and the committee, and are ensuring that the youth vote is not going to vote, basically. That's really what's going on here. And we all, and at least I feel sincerely that the Republican vanguard who's doing this, they don't really care about anti-Semitism. That's not the issue. And I don't feel as if they really are concerned about Jewish persons, particularly when they lean white nationalist, right? I mean, it's hard to believe that this is out of a sincere interest in combating anti-Semitism. I mean, particularly when you've got, a Republican congressman grilling our president, Egyptian-born president, about the New Testament and the coming curse of God of the Bible on, I mean, this is not about anti-Semitism. But that struck me as actually one of the most possibly Christian, anti-Semitic, and Islamophobic intervention.
It's at the heart of their long-term agenda. The Christian
exactly.
People, exactly. I hope people understand, just to add that, Christian Zionists, at the end of the day, most of them are still either the Jews will convert or they'll be eliminated. That's still their bottom line agenda, and this is just part of their kind of program to advance and speed up what's the word I'm looking for? What's the Christians
Rapture.
the rapture.
Sure.
The rapture.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, completely. So we're here to rethink the university in a radical way. And I couldn't think of anyone better than Kali Akuno to be rethinking in a cooperative way, very quickly. And I'm sorry I'm taking so much time, Callie. We'll get to you in just a second. There are a few examples of cooperative universities in the world, but none of them are really cooperative faculty or student cooperatives for liberal arts. The Mondragon Cooperative Consortium has a marvelous cooperative university, but most of its operations are tied to professional and trade learning in connection with the work of cooperatives. And we're going to talk about that in a way, because in part that's where the revenue comes, or where the money makes sense. But it creates a problem for a liberal arts education where it's hard to tie that to a revenue generating thing. There are cooperative universities in Nairobi, Kenya, and Bogota, Colombia, that focus their pedagogy on the functioning of worker and consumer cooperatives and the principles of cooperatives, although they are not structured as faculty or student cooperatives themselves. And of course, in the United States, co-op university refers not to a university structured as a cooperative, but rather as a university where students do semester-long internships in the field, which is a great thing. Northeastern University in Boston has always been a leader in this respect, and it's cooperative in the sense that you're going out and you're working in for the whole semester in the field, but it's not a faculty or student cooperative. And so this seems like the most important challenge today, is how to figure out how to make it work. And what we're going to do tonight is really roll up our sleeves and think about what the options are. I'm thrilled to be joined by Kali Akuno, who is the co-founder and co-director of Cooperation Jackson down in Jackson, Mississippi, a lifelong organizer, a philosopher, a practitioner, a builder of cooperatives, of more than cooperatives, of an entire sustainable economy in Jackson, Mississippi. He's brilliant. He's the author of important books and collections, Jackson Rising, and then the even thicker tome, Jackson Rising Redux, which came out more recently, both of which grew out of conferences in Jackson to rethink our cities, to rethink our society, to rethink in a cooperative way, building cooperatives and land trusts and all kinds of devices. Welcome, Callie. Thanks for coming back to the 1313. We had a session with you, and I remember how generous you were, because you had COVID and you were sick.
That's right.
Nevertheless, you came and we talked about Cooperation Jackson, and that was just brilliant. But so how do we build, right, a cooperative, a faculty or student co-op? How do we think about it? It's complicated because, you know, what we're trying to do is get rid of donors, trying to get rid of the government, trying to get rid of bureaucratic administration. But of course, those things exist because the money comes from the donors or the government. And so when you pull the plug on that, it just becomes really complicated as how you could build something with faculty or students as the members of the cooperative. This is a bit of an experiment, our brainstorming tonight. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts generally and also kind of practically? And we're going to go through the practical in more detail.
Well, first, let me celebrate you all for even thinking of this question, you know, and really starting to think through alternatives in the midst of, you know, the intense struggle that you all are in. You know, and taking a few minutes to pause and thinking about the long term, right? Like that's That's very critical, and definitely want to applaud you all for doing that. To get into it, I also, I like to state oftentimes like the practical, so we kind of get an understanding of, I shouldn't say the practical in this case, like the concrete, so we get an understanding of the forces arrayed against us, to not necessarily to be intimidated, right, in any form or fashion,
Right.
but to just be, like not naive per se about what we're dealing with,
Exactly.
and not accusing you all of that. So don't get me wrong. You're the when I saw in the news last night, they brought up that ridiculous machine to go into the building.
Bear, they call it, right? The tank.
Yeah, yeah. That was just a sure. That was a sign of warning. It was not necessary in any form or fashion to bring that out. That was clearly just a message sending, not only to you all, but to students all throughout the country, knowing that Columbia has really kind of been the epicenter of this in terms of like media coverage, not only throughout the United States, but throughout the world. So now that being said, I'm bringing that up because let's face it, Columbia University is a beast. It is deeply entangled in most of the core institutions of governance in the United States, not just in New York City, but in the United States. That is situated in Manhattan, and some of the most pristine real estate in the world, also brings its own set of particular interests, as you all witness. So I'm just saying that to you got a formidable enemy
Yes.
on the other side of the table,
Right.
and to be aware of that. But nothing is invincible. Everything has its weaknesses, and part of our challenge is to always figure out, how can we in a struggle like this, and it will be a struggle, how do we press upon the weak points to gain an advantage, and then how can we do a little bit judo and turn what they kind of view as their own strengths as some momentum that we can kind of use against them. And I think the first piece, I think you all have done very well, in terms of the judo, but I just want to state that and keep an eye on it, that uh, any proposal like this, if and when it goes public, know it will be laughed at.
All right.
But notice that the judo here is uh, given Columbia's stature, given its kind of positionality, and given how much bad press it has now, like all of those things combined to give you actual leverage with a serious and concrete plan of building an alternative. And clearly there are millions of people out there who want to build alternatives.
Mhm.
Like that momentum is clearly on our side and has to be tapped into and leveraged. And so this is I think I would argue this is a case where, like the popularity, as it were, of Columbia could be used as a judo strength. So just to put that out. Now, the main thing, there's one thing you said, uh, Bernard, at the top, that I would ask you guys to look at maybe a little bit differently in terms of thinking through this.
Okay.
And that is, I think this has to be viewed as a multi-stakeholder cooperative,
Okay. Okay.
right? And from the top, be very clear about who are the different parties that you need to bring into a process like this that will both, enable it to function and run, but to also give it, some political legs, and to a degree, right, some economic support that will be much needed. And this is where I think, again, being in New York gives you some particular leverage in some respects that you might not have anywhere else. And so, what do I mean by that? Due to your north, of which there's been at least 100 years of struggle with, there's the community of Harlem, which is changing, but in reality is always been somewhat walled off from Columbia University. Well, this co-op needs to think about breaking that wall and how to make this, a truly community-based kind of open university that folks could come into from the community, like with open source enrollment, like we had, in many of the struggles in the 60s and 70s. That would both make certain portions of it both affordable, accessible, and why this particular piece is important, so that there's a community kind of broad stakeholder or set of community, like players that would be stakeholders in the co-op, because it offers in the long run not only resource support but defense, right? Just a level of defense that you will need, both against like the forces like the NYPD, but also leverage against a lot of the other kind of institutional players. Right. And in this case, I'm just going to bring in, I want you all to think there's a quote that I love from somebody who I consider one of my teachers, which is Amilcar Cabral. If you guys want to look him up, he was the kind of the strategic thinker and leader of the PIGC, which led the liberation of Guinea-Bissau and the Cape Verdean Islands, the 1960s and early 1970s. And he had a quote that the people are our mountains, right? And this comes from initially, that quote comes from, they were fighting an anti-colonial struggle, armed struggle against the Portuguese and its NATO backers. So it wasn't just Portugal alone. And they initially were getting support from the likes of the Soviet Union and China. China gave them some direct kind of, support of bringing folks in to get them trained and some, what the Chinese learned about guerrilla warfare. And they sent their folks there and they came back and they kind of quickly realized their tactics call for them to like head for the hills and to bunk out in kind of environments and territories that you don't have in Guinea-Bissau. They don't have any mountains or hills there. And so they had to be like, okay, what from this is useful and what is not. And what they learned very quickly and kind of adjusting is like, okay, we have no mountains except for our people. And so we're going to have to be, really ingratiate ourselves amongst the people to serve them, to understand what they need, what they're willing to sacrifice in the context of kind of the war that was going on. That's what he came up with that term. And I would argue that almost every successful movement has to find some way to relate to the people in its environment if it's really going to be able to survive and have the resources, the political support that you're going to need. And you're going to need that.
Right.
And you're in the piece where I'm saying New York is a benefit here is that you all are exist in a way that your community could be broader than just Harlem. I wouldn't just limit it to that, because you have folks who can come all throughout the greater kind of metro region as a particular community because of the nature of the public transportation, right? That's a unique feature. Like, trust me, in Jackson, we have nothing similar to that. So it would change the ball game for us considerably if we had something like that. So think about that as a resource. Now, the other stakeholders and why I'm pushing that, there's another reason, right? Is that there's a way in which both faculty and students, obviously will have to be in the center of a piece. But then there's this other component which was related to the community, right? And that's the staff, right? Who are not professors or who are not, adjuncts or who are not, graduate students, but who play a vital function and role in the actual operations, of the university. So you're talking about the cooking staff, the janitors, and the engineers and all those folks who, for most people in almost any institution, the institution wouldn't survive without.
Right.
But you rarely see them and they rarely have a voice except for maybe through their union mediation. But for a vision like this one is directly tied to the community. definitely have to think of including them in some very strategic way, as an equal partner at the table about how the university should function. And if you're thinking about it in perhaps like dynamic ways of how could it be more energy efficient, how could it be more, you know, do better recycling.
Right.
Most of the ideas from the folks who have to do that day by day, they're going to have some pretty remarkable ideas that I can guarantee you probably have not been listened to by folks higher up in management, right? And that's not a dynamic that we want to create and then further alienate folks, bring them to the table. And trust me, when they come in, they come in with a number of different assets that are often overlooked because oftentimes like the university quite often kind of probably thinks of their unions as an obstacle, political obstacle to be avoided, rather than for us, that could potentially be a major strength of having, again, more allies in a base of support to call in for resource mobilization, for skill utilization. So I think you have those, you need to like 4 levels to this. There may be more before, but there's faculty and staff, students, and then the community.
Right.
So that thing is like your multi-stakeholder piece to make this open, broad, and I think accessible, and then a level of resource mobilization that could come out of this. Now, I don't think it would be able to support, like all of the institution and all its dynamics. But if you're talking about a resource base, if everybody there is paying, like kind of like some annual dues within this coalition, there's a level of resource support that would at least enable a stable operations. And then you have to be more creative in terms of kind of what you're offering in regards to how the tuition and everything else should be structured to then maybe offset some of the things that you would initially on the front end lose. And let me be real about that. And that's why I sent you the video. But what Bernard, what you laid out is true. That video, the Republican Party basically came out full strength today with that press release and said they're going to use this as a wedge issue,
Right.
and you all are right at the heart of their political narrative about these being what they call them little Gazas, right?
Right. Right.
And they meant that, trust me, they went through a series of workshops and focus groups
Right.
to come up with that term.
Right.
And they
Focus
intend
group.
to say
Right.
that we're going to flatten the student and community resistance in the same way that Gaza has been flattened.
Yeah.
That choice of words is not by accident, but they lay out a whole plan of basically saying that uh, um, with the bills they passed about a very narrow definition about anti-Semitism. They're trying to get certain groups that support any groups that they may deem to be terrorists to have their federal nonprofit recognition struck, and so that's one that strikes at the. We shared that in our core team this morning. Some of this law that's going out, and we're just identifying, hey, this would be us, right? Just given the piece. So it's
Right.
to be aware of this particular agenda and then find ways, I think, in which to counter it.
Yeah.
Like, just quite frankly.
Yeah.
But that's the initial
Yeah.
kind of framing piece. Now, I think one thing that
Can I jump in with one thing though,
sure,
Kelly? So that framing I think is essential, and so that's already just you've really already contributed so much with that framing of multi-party stakeholders with the community and with staff and with everyone who is kind of making it function. I do want to, I did want to emphasize that, I'm not so naive as to think that, Colombia would be the best place to imagine this. In part, we have in front of us all the financial statements for Colombia, and I've put them in a link there. I mean, one thing is clear that, when you look at the revenues, patient care revenue is huge. It's 1,659,000,000, right? So that there's a hospital that goes with Columbia that is an enormous institution. When you look at the assets and liabilities, right? I mean, the real estate, land, buildings, equipment for $5 billion worth, basically. That's hard to imagine thinking about how you deal with that in terms of a conversion to a cooperative, the investments, $14.7 billion, right? I mean, but we also have in our materials, smaller colleges, smaller liberal arts colleges. And so, I threw in the assets and liabilities and cash flow for Manhattan College, which is an interesting experiment or an experiment to think about. Manhattan College is going through very difficult times. I sent around an article about it. They've closed 20 departments. They closed their philosophy departments, all languages except Spanish. I mean, it's just, they're really kind of, it's a little college. It's actually a Christian college in Riverdale. So it's not the best example, maybe, for many reasons, but it is one of these kind of like small liberal arts schools that is teetering, and that one could think of as maybe that would be that's the anchor steam, right, bordering on bankruptcy, but not having all of the the assets that make things complicated for a place like Colombia. I mean, I think that, if we think smaller, maybe, it becomes a little bit less fantastic or naive to imagine having an institution that might not have as much real estate, might not have a med school and a law school and a business school and whatnot, but actually a liberal arts institution, which then it seems more feasible to think of as a multi-party stakeholder, involving the community and the staff, but also the students and the faculty, right? And so I just wanted to kind of put that on the table, because it's not, I think it's not totally pie in the sky if you think about it as a smaller experiment that you could build up, rather than, going for something which is so established with such an endowment and so many assets that it would be pretty much impossible to imagine how you would convert, right? So I just wanted to
Gotcha.
suggest that, we can have this conversation at a more realistic or more modest level, but that could really think about how students could be the ones determining how critical thought happens on campus, right? Rather than the trustees or the government. So I just wanted to interject that for a second.
Yeah, so and let me let you all know that exactly something more to scale that you're mentioning, I'm directly involved in right now. And
Tell us about
so
it.
there's Goddard College, which is historical liberal arts college in Plainfield, Vermont. It recently just closed its doors. I mean, a couple of weeks ago. And I think they're shifting all of their student body to another small liberal arts college, which is, the name is skipping me right now. But Cooperation Jackson is supporting our sister organization, Cooperation Vermont, to try to buy the campus. And working with, we have a fundraising campaign going on right now. And we're working with the faculty, staff, students, community on a multi-stakeholder cooperative that once we kind of secure the grounds to transform that into what we're calling at this a particular point in time a just transition campus that would support a cooperative college.
That's brilliant. That's
Um,
it, right? That's it.
Yeah, so we're already in the midst of doing this and thinking through it, and because of its kind of both situation and lead, we're thinking of doing in that environment. Vermont is still fundamentally agricultural based state, but Plainfield, so you all know, is the city that's right. I always get my geography right to the north
Okay.
of of Montpelier. Montpelier is the capital of the state of Vermont. Now, it's not a big city. The largest city in Vermont is Burlington, and Burlington, I think barely has 400,000 people in it. So you're not talking about major, big cities.
Right.
But Plainfield is right above that. So it's directly in some access capital to kind of the state government and the political kind of dynamics that comes there. So on that account, we're trying to strengthen its liberal arts section from what it has been, so that we have a direct engagement, right? In how do you do kind of alternate governance? How do you do and confront the kind of the governing systems that kind of dominate the state of Vermont, right? And how do we take things kind of like Vermont already has a weird way of like these community assemblies because of scale that are very similar to like our people's assemblies that actually do, and the times I've been in, they actually do function with direct kind of community participation and engagement and direct decision making. But how we're trying to focus on, well, how do we extend that, right? And then how do we extend what they're actually governing? Uh, uh, because there's a lot of restrictions and a lot of limitations in Vermont, which were kind of good by a particular type of design around like environmental preservation. But it's this distorted notion that to preserve is to like exclude indigenous people from the land
Right.
without recognizing the interrelationship between the two. So trying to change some of those dynamics.
Yeah. Yeah.
And part of what we're trying to do is just do a really integrated develop or integrated curriculum that deals with environmental questions, that deals with um, kind of holistic questions, kind of coming at it from a curriculum design, um, both rooted in trying to uplift and enhance indigenous knowledge and indigenous, kind of epistemology, but to also kind of, marry that with, the practices that come from Buddhism, that comes from another different traditions around, how do you relate to the land and how do you relate to a level of like self-care and community care? And so this just transition piece is kind of really focused in on all that as like a very proactive curriculum that's kind of like, trying to be as holistic and integrated possibly as we can.
Wow.
And
That
within
is,
that, trying to do some other things that are focusing on how do we shift, also to local production. So that's the other, inappropriate technology. So these are the things that, we're trying to play out within real time where the university right now is very well, let me say the hacks that they brought in to demolish the college are trying to avoid it so that they can just kind of get top dollar. But the thing that where we have some leverage is that Goddard is a nonprofit, and so it has to abide by certain kind of community norms and standards in terms of its transition, and they haven't lived or abided by those, so we still have a great deal of leverage in this. But we're thinking through. I just wanted to highlight, you all know, so
yeah,
uh,
no, this is
a lot of
fab.
this is, yeah,
This is,
some of this is just,
this is
I
like
got a call and
doing
thinking off the top, but
right.
some of it is we're trying to practice.
Yeah, no, I had an intuition. You were the person to talk to. I was right. You're doing it. I knew it. You taught us so much last year about kind of land trusts and creating cooperatives in Mississippi, right? You don't have a co-op statute except for agricultural. So you do the LLCs. I mean, I remember our conversation. It was like really, it felt as if you were giving us a law lesson at the law school. So tell us a little bit. So this project sounds great. I mean, this is fascinating, and I'm definitely going to go fund. But how do the finances work in a project like this? In other words, let's assume that you all can, you know, get it, buy it or whatever, as a nonprofit. How then over time does it work in terms of tuition becomes membership fees? Do membership fees then become something that can be transferred to somebody else? Does a student does a student have to come in? Yeah, exactly. Like, does the faculty come in and buy a membership or something like that? Does a student buy a membership? Does staff? How does that work in terms of actually kind of cash flow so that the institutions, not in the red, basically?
Well, there's a couple of different levels that we experiment based upon knowledge. So, we think the most common way that this is going to be dealt with is that instead of just coming in and say purchasing a membership, stake, what most folks would do would come in and work for that stake.
Okay.
So it's like some defrayed costs, but then full access. And that can come in just terms of a certain number, like volunteer hours with like more of like a time banking kind of orientation, or it can come in like a deferred payment again, like, okay, instead of, if you're faculty or staff, you just say, hey, just take, whatever, 5% from each paycheck for the next year or 2 years, whatever the situation is, that would pay out of from our share, and then kind of like the annual dues. That way we can have an initial balance, but without having everybody to just automatically assume that everybody's coming in with resources kind of off the top to be able to afford this. But we're trying to make a premium here between what labor will enable this to happen, that could be offset from the amount of kind of capital or financial resources that we might need, and trying to start this off very initially. And this works because of the scale. Let me be clear about that. You scale up, there will be probably some different challenges. But at the scale we're operating in Vermont, that you could relatively do. And then the critical piece that we want to try to bake in is that students come in and get a share, but the as a student, but we want that to be something that's transferable to another particular piece that we want to have there, and that is for them, once people graduate, for them to become the alumni association becomes kind of an automatic transfer, but also kind of a remaining like voting pool and resource base that folks can continue to go on within that category of membership.
Okay. Okay.
Right. And so like what we're trying to think of is like, how do we keep a stream, and how do we keep, contact and relationships with the student body for another rounds of both resources, but also, kind of an amplification of the model and the protection. And this particular piece we got from Mondragon, right?
Okay.
About from one of their pieces around how do you turn them, and then they actually have a way in which they do a rotational. They have many of those folks on a rotational kind of advisory board or trustee board. So there's resource, but also they can call on them as like resources to come back at some particular times to like teach classes or to do things to, and as a way to again like offset some of the costs, but make sure that there's a constant flow of skill and knowledge they can tap into within the university setting. So that's a particular piece that we want to do. The other thing, for us within this particular model, we want, and we're intending on creating an operable farm on the college campus, and to turn the community production center into a small scale manufacturing, so that what folks are producing automatically in terms of some level of commodity exchange brings in resources directly, from just point of sales into the university to help offset its costs. That's going to be a major thing in this particular experiment that we know we're going to have to do. And the thinking is, for us, the disadvantage, so folks are clear, and why we're thinking through some of these stuff right now, the disadvantage for Goddard is that they went away from a residency model about 20 years ago. And this sale is a result of, that steady decline.
Okay.
And the numbers just, decreasing. So we're very clear. It's probably going to take, in our case, about 10 years, right, of reinventing this, doing promotions, doing proof of concept, wherein we can rebuild the student base to then match and mix some of the numbers to make it viable, right? And that's why us actually having a set of cooperative enterprises directly situated on campus that are earning and generating, like revenue that goes back into the college and university is going to be essential for this particular model survival. And I would think on a certain level, that would need to be consistent. I think for a number of different, kind of liberal arts colleges, in particular, maybe the one that you're envisioning, so that you don't have to be dependent upon, too many grants or funding from, uh, I would say, in the federal government, because depending on where this is, certain state governments are more reliable in one direction either way, right? Like Vermont, fundamentally, we know is going to be Democrat for a while. That's likely not to change. New York is probably going to remain fundamentally Democrat for a while. But like in Mississippi, I couldn't count on state funding for anything. I can count on the state to try to take all the funding that we have, but I wouldn't even dare think about asking. In my conception of doing this in Mississippi, I wouldn't dare think about asking the state. I'd get more access to resources from the federal government.
Yeah.
But depending on where the federal government is trending, and right now it doesn't look like it's going to be trending in a way that will support anything in regards to liberal arts, you kind of want to design a model of one that you could tap into some of those resources, but you better also have a model where you say, hey, we're not getting anything except for, maybe what we could generate.
Right.
And
Right.
think about the cooperative college also about what type of cooperative institutions could it also create. So like the piece I was saying in this example earlier, the there's probably several cafeterias on I'm just going back to what I know about Columbia. There's several cafeterias on campus. All right, turn those into cooperative owned restaurants that are directly tied into the to the university that you're constructing, but to have it be much more of an open type campus where people from the community are then, kind of already incentivized to come on in, and instead of just eating around the campus, bring some of that into us directly in campus to make it more living. And that's another way of thinking about earning, like revenues, or taking some of the other facilities, that could be opened up, so that they accommodate more kids in folks in the community, to serve, maybe function similar to like a YMCA or something like that, where there's more direct community access, for a fee that people can come in is also another type of revenue that keeps the community engagement, keep the involvement, and keeps the circular economy kind of building and rotating and developing in course. So I think part of it is going to take a repivot around how do you take the things that are right now very exclusive and they're only kind of regulated for like faculty and students for the most part. How do you re-articulate that so that it's opened up, much more to the community, and instead of like charging the community exorbitant fees, charge some steady things that will generate a certain consistent level of income to help the thing, stay, basically in the black.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
some of it is just a rearticulation of utilizing what you have, but employing it in a different way and generating, opening up to greater access and utility.
Right, right. So as I said, we've got all our students here gathered, but we've got one question from Arjun. So go for it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Callie, for everything that you've brought to us. Professor Harcourt's definitely right. You were definitely the person for us to communicate with and think this through, this cooperative university concept. And the thing that I wanted to consider is, I know you had said that it was a 10-year projection, given promotion and like a proof of concept. And the thing that I want to bring into this conversation is the mobilization of the encampments that just happened, and how that literally happened overnight, and how mobilization right now in this age could potentially cut that 10-year mark down drastically, because what we kind of have seen is a form of revenue is attention capital. There's financial capital, there's political capital, but the attention of youth literally is changing the world. Like the attention and the intentions of youth and creating a collective based on off of that and based off of what a student could mobilize could be kind of something to consider. And I wondered if you had anything to I wonder what you think about that. Like if we could use the virality of social media as like this way to expedite the literal revenue or the literal kind of workings or creation of this university.
Yeah, in y'all case, absolutely. Right. You all have a tremendous amount of capital right now. That I think is largely untapped. That if like an idea like this where to go out, trust me, you guys could there would be resources that could be mobilized from around the planet right now to support what you guys are doing. Right. And like a clear articulation of a vision or a project. The initial startup, y'all wouldn't have to worry about it at all because of that, the kind of the social and cultural capital that you've accrued, just in the course of the last 3 weeks. And that's what I was saying. This is where Columbia is an asset, right? They didn't intend it to be, but it's just given its positionality, it's already there. It can just be tapped in. This is what I was talking about, that judo. This is the judo point. Utilize it for what it is. That you have the attention, and folks are looking to you all. What's the next move? Recognize that, right? Like there's a window. What's the next move? What are they doing next? What's the next step? Is this over? Is this not? How do we continue? How do we support it? Because people want it to go on in some form or fashion. So that's a strength that you have. And what you put out doesn't that, I would argue, like it don't have to be perfect by any stretch of the imagination. Doesn't have to be, every I dotted and every T crossed. Folks would not necessarily expect that. But the lead I think that you all, would have, and I would draw this from our experience in cooperation in Jackson. Folks told us 20 years ago, there's no way anything like what you guys are doing could happen in Jackson. We're like, okay, that's what you believe, right? We have a vision, we have commitment, and we're going to see it through. The visionary component of it, don't underestimate that. Like, numbers will scare the shit out of people, but a vision will inspire them.
I completely agree because I feel that was something that I was so convicted with what's been happening on campus is there was definite mobilization, but there was less organization. And both of those parts are, I mean, it's a role to play, just like what Professor Harcourt said. It is almost impossible to conceive of, the system, the centuries long foundations of Columbia to be like, destroyed overnight. So what is that long term? There would be a transitory phase between some type of cooperative, to view it in the theoretical of Columbia University, there would be some type of transition, but it's like, what is that vision? What is that long-term goal that would potentially mean, a couple years of being underground, a couple years of just like what you were saying before. It's like once it's released to the public, it has to be ready. A 5-year, 10-year plan has to be ready when you release to the public. And I think right now, because of social media, the process is reversed. Right now, it's mobilization and everything's in the public eye first, and then somehow tangentially organizations happening at the same time. But I think something that's valuable is that kind of vision that's being kind of curated behind the scene.
Here, we got another question from,
Push back.
you want to push back and then we'll go turn to Disha. Yeah,
I just wanted to push back on that a little bit
Right.
because I've been in conversation with.
can you hear,
You speak up just a little bit.
Okay,
because it's coming from here.
okay. I just wanted to push back on that a little bit. But because I've just been in conversation with a lot of these students and I was really struck and impressed by the level of organization that they had and the planning that went into even just like the initial setup. And I think that part of this image of it not being super organized, they started calling themselves like an autonomous group recently, which kind of harkens back to some of our earlier conversations in this class. And I think that's intentional, because of the fact that they want there to be space for organic development and for the folks who are just involved to create beautiful things. And so, yeah, that was my only pushback, but I loved everything you said, Art.
Thanks, Ray. Disha.
Hi, Kali. I'm Disha. I'm from India. I'm a law student, and I was actually supposed to meet you last week when my friend Chandan Kumar was here. Chandan is a labor union organizer in India, and he
Small world.
yeah. Yeah, we meet finally. My question was, I was really impressed when you said that the idea of a cooperative university needs to sort of dismantle those walls, where, the community in Harlem has always been, sort of blocked off Columbia University, and that is what prevents it from being a truly cooperative university. And I really like that because last week in the encampment, we had Dereka Purnell who came. And I think she said something very important. She said that nothing that's happening on this campus is unprecedented because this campus is in Harlem and Black and brown lives are being targeted and they're being arrested, and police is called upon this community day in and day out. And there's nothing unprecedented about that. And she also said that the students are great, they're great organizers, but they're also great thinkers because they are making these connections between what is happening in Gaza and what is happening in Harlem and what is happening in probably India, with the caste system. That's my addition. So I was just wondering if when we're imagining a cooperative university and we have all these brilliant ideas, and of course we can't forget the fact that Columbia University and Columbia students are in many ways privileged and elite in that sense, right? Whatever comes from us cannot be the ultimate voice in terms of what a cooperative university should look like. And we do understand that. I think a lot of the students who are organizing do understand, and they are constantly saying that we shouldn't be the face of this, and we're just like enabling what needs to be enabled. So I was just wondering that when we're imagining a cooperative university, does it have to be something that is as organic as you spoke about the Harlem community and what's happening in the community and the kind of organizing that is happening? And do we completely overlook that when we imagine a cooperative university in this space or in any other space? And I want to give the example of Nalanda University in India, which is this anti-caste university. The word Nalanda means it's a Buddhist word, and I'm so glad that you spoke about Buddhism because Buddhism is very political in India, especially for the Dalit community in India. And Buddhism has these small like viharas, and viharas are these areas that are like these makeshift sort of structures that are meant for Buddhist monks to rest. But oftentimes these areas would become, or these makeshift homes would become like these places or spaces where there was a lot of intellectual churning. Now, the Dalit community in India mass converted to Buddhism. As you know, they rejected Hinduism because they were treated badly by Hinduism. And Dr. Ambedkar led that movement. But what you saw is that in a lot of slums in India, or ghettos in India, where the Dalit community resides, they would make these makeshift viharas, right? And that is something that they would do out of love for Dr. Ambedkar or out of love for Buddhism. Now, Nalanda University is this project where this man, Anup Kumar, Dalit man, he sort of starts, he thinks that let's use viharas and let's start educating students in the viharas, right? And so you would have all these kids who never could go to schools, like in their communities, have these viharas, and they would come to the vihars, and Anup and his friends would teach these kids. And they were mostly Dalit kids and mostly Bahujan kids who were excluded from the caste system, and they were not allowed to take any education. And that's how the Nalanda University project started. Now, he also used something very interesting, which is Dr. Ambedkar had sort of, and the Dalit community worships Dr. Ambedkar. He said that, I'm sorry if I'm taking a lot of time, but I really wanted to talk about this. So Dr. Ambedkar said that every Dalit person who makes it, either as a bureaucrat or whatever, like he sort of rises up in the social ladder, or the economic or educational ladder should donate 8% of his or her income to the community, right? And then Nalanda was literally like from these small viharas, and they all came together in Nagpur and the region around. A lot of this bureaucrat community from the Dalit community sort of started donating, and they were donating 8% of their out of love for Dr. Ambedkar or whatever. And like Nalanda is like huge, and there are like 2,000 kids that they are teaching, and it's a very organic cooperative movement, is what I'm trying to say. It's a very community movement. And my question therefore was like, when we're imagining a cooperative university, can we ignore the communities, the organic work that is happening amongst the communities and their histories and their sort of their ancestral, knowledge that is coming with them, and build such a university? Can that happen in isolation? And how else can we imagine a cooperative university that is so like organic and so beautiful? Yeah, that was less of a question and more of a rant.
If I may, I'll just offer, and thank you for that. I've read many of the works of Ambedkar over the years, and familiar with some of the examples that you cite. So I hope other folks, who are there listening, also take that up and study it. And there are other examples from India. Like a lot of, just so folks are familiar, like some of the ways in which we've kind of envisioned participatory democracy comes from the Kerala experience that we've drawn on, in our work, in Jackson, so see the circularity and the importance of ideas, and trying to draw from other people's experience, which is very similar to ours. But I will say this, you better not ignore, if you want this to succeed, you better not ignore what's going on in the community around you. And you better include it to the greatest extent possible, particularly if you want to open it up to the community. The community is going to come with a lot of pushback around how a lot of things have functioned, for decades around there, right? And there's going to have to be a lot of patience and learning on all sides, because the creatures of the left in the community will be readily jump on this. But folks who don't have like those kind of political ideological commitments, but just their daily lived experience, who live in and around the community in particular, they may not be as open to, quickly embracing Columbia or what you guys are talking about, because they have no what's in their experience to trust you. That's going to have to be earned over some time. And you're going to give it time. And so kind of related to your question, I'll just say this: too much structure will stifle innovation. Like it won't be enough dynamic new thought that could enter into the space. It'll be too rigid. But too little structure, and your efforts will collapse. So there's a balance that you're going to kind of constantly have to struggle to create and recreate, kind of day in and day out, but not lose sight of the critical lessons around, how do we make this both as inclusive as possible, but also principled, so that we can deal with issues when they arise, in an equitable and democratic, manner, because there will be challenges that come up. Not everybody's going to agree. Not everybody's going to see things the same way. And just turning into a cooperative is not going to resolve all the issues and, contradictions that exist in the society. Those are going to come in and play themselves out, but those are things to be prepared, I think, to try to engage and actually try to figure out ways how to turn any and all conflict into something that's generative rather than destructive, right? What is the lesson to be learned? But going back to your point, I'll just stress again, in thinking about this, definitely think about your blind spots and not knowing, what the community what it wants, what it needs, what it thinks, what it's already doing. If not taking that into account will be a sure way to not succeed.
Thanks, Kali. I know I'm conscious that you're really being generous with your time. I really appreciate it. Can we take 4 quick comments maybe, and then give you a chance to kind of, I mean, I don't want to tax you too much, but I got a lot of hands going up, so we're gonna give
Okay.
4 quick comments maybe, and then you can take those, I think, maybe.
Okay.
Okay, so first, Hope.
Hi, okay.
Okay, so you got to scream or get up or come up.
Okay. Yeah, screaming's not good. I just got over being sick.
Okay, this way.
This way?
That's good, go ahead.
Okay. So I have some disjointed thoughts that I just wanted to present. You can hear? I have some disjointed thoughts that I just want to present. I've been taking notes on my phone. I promise I haven't been like completely ignoring everything going on. But anyways, I'm very impressed with how students at this university have organized and mobilized so quickly. You know, even yesterday, as soon as the campus closures were announced, we had groups of students who were coming together to create community pantries for students who were barred from campus, students who couldn't access dining, etc. And I realized, that the initial impetus for this mobilization was very much a single issue, an issue that, of course, is connected to others because liberation fundamentally is collective and it's intertwined. But I keep wondering how we can preserve this energy and how we can, mobilize quickly for other causes as well. For example, feeding and providing shelter for our unhoused neighbors. And so how can we really continue to apply that spirit of coöperism, especially within a university structure that is fundamentally a capitalist institution beholden to trustees that has proven twice now its willingness to call the police on its own students. I also want to echo Disha a little bit about how, in Harlem, police violence is a form of quotidian necropolitics. And despite our physical proximity to Harlem, we kind of exist in this bubble of the Morningside Acropolis. Like, we're physically gated off from Harlem, and the police brutality that happens all around us just isn't acknowledged because it has been so normalized. And during new student orientation for undergrads, we're basically taught not to go to certain places in Harlem because they're considered dangerous. And I mean, really, they're just over policed. And so I'm wondering how, I guess I'm wondering ways that we can create a cooperative university, but more than that, a cooperative community all around us. Sorry, I have, the fundamental question there is why I guess comment is that the outrage at police violence seems to come right now when it's weaponized against Ivy League students and not other members in our broader community. And that's incredibly disturbing to me. I have more thoughts, but in the interest
That's
of
great.
time, I won't share
Yeah,
them.
yeah, we're kind of, okay. Raycash,
Oh, should I stand over here?
sure.
Hi, Kelly. Thank you so much for coming. You probably don't remember, but we met in 2017 at this festival in Montreal. No, you were on a panel with my friend Desmond Cole. And while we were there, I remember asking you a question about like what it looks like to be involved in Cooperation Jackson and how you sort of integrate new folks. And I remember, I think about it a lot, actually. One of the things you said was that part of the onboarding process is really ensuring folks have like a solid political education and solid grounding in certain fundamental concepts. And so I guess when we were talking and when you were talking at the top about the People's University, and you're talking about it being sort of this like multi-stakeholder cooperative with, staff, students, multiple stakeholders being part of creating and putting, making sure that it becomes a thing that exists in the world. I guess I'm just wondering, would you would there be a requirement for there to be that shared set of values and a certain like political education for everyone to kind of be on board with before they're able to join the cooperative? Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. These are great questions. Lara, you want to come over here somehow or stand over there, just talking to the mic?
I feel like, hi, thank you for your time. I feel like my question is actually kind of similar, so I'll try to be concise. I was wondering, modern universities in the United States, to varying degrees, exercise some degree of discretion in who they admit. I was wondering if you think that a cooperative university would necessarily have to be completely inclusive in its admissions, because I don't think any university, even at the community college level, does so today.
Great, thanks, Lara. And Parker?
So thank you for spending time with us tonight. So I had, two questions very much informed by the events at Columbia over the past 2 weeks. So the first, and I think it's a question I often have with cooperative-based kind of approaches, but having done your work in Cooperative Jackson or Cooperation Jackson, the question is that when we are thinking about the cooperative university and the inevitable pushback that it's going to receive, maybe not necessarily from like physical force, but maybe bureaucratic force, how you kind of theorize or think that we might be able to overcome that with your project in Vermont, using the tools that you used in Jackson to overcome that kind of resistance of the established powers that be, whether it be the state or the kind of economic structure. And then the second question I have, again, drawing on your experiences in Jackson, when we think about the hierarchies within these cooperative structures, for example, like I think in a lot of places hierarchy isn't necessary. In the education system, there is a place where I see hierarchy as a necessity because of the distinguishing between a professor and a student and the experience of the professor and the kind of newness of the student. And what kind of really brings that to the forefront is the concern, particularly within Israel, is where I'm drawing this inspiration, but I think Florida as well, where the state has a lot of influence over public education. And then these students then go to university, and in a cooperative university, the students having a larger influence over what they're being taught if they're coming from a place like Florida or they're coming from a place like Israel, where the state had a very specific project for them, and they get to the university and like this project's now challenged and they reject that kind of challenge. How does the cooperative university, which is just trying to bring their perspective into the conversation, deal with that kind of dichotomy?
Great, thanks. Thanks, Parker. Thanks, everyone, for those great questions and comments. Do you want to address some of that?
Yeah, all those are courses unto themselves, each one of those questions.
Yeah, right.
Let me take a stab at a few things. I put up, for those of you who can see.
Let me. I'm going to share that.
Yeah.
I'm going to share that. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So this goes
Here we
to
go.
all the questions, but the second one in particular, right? And I want to start there because this values question and the vision kind of alignment question, don't underestimate how important that is. And that let me put it this way: it is best when there are a set of shared values and principles to fall back upon, because it helps to align practice and it helps to frame accountability. Now, this does not mean or should mean that everything should be uniform. That's not the purpose, right? But we have to be able, to be able to mediate at the very end, like what discussion are we in and how do we want to kind of resolve this? And knowledge can come in from anywhere. But these what you see here. This is when you first walk in our door. There's to the kind of left of this, there's just a big Cooperation Jackson symbol, and then there's this. And it's right by, this is at our Bow Lagoon Center. It's right there to set an intentionality to anybody who's coming in about, this is a little bit about what this group is about, what these principles, what we're trying to accomplish, and what we're trying to basically deal with. And it touches on a couple of the different questions, which why I put it up. So this question about kind of admissions and a criteria around admissions. I think in the experiment that you guys are trying to think through, I would argue that an open enrollment, an open admissions process will be the best way to go. And that is, if you're going to win the trust of folks in your community, in your immediate surrounding, you have to be prepared to deal with the unevenness in terms of both access to education that has been enforced upon people, and the unevenness in folks' literacy and how that is interpreted and weighed in. And the only way that you're going to break it so people truly feel that this is something that is in service of community is by having open admissions and being able to take people where they're at, in alignment with certain principles, and engage them where they're at, not with the point of just kind of keeping people where they're at or keeping yourself where you think you may be, but to have it as an open exchange. And this speaks to a level of the part of the question, and I'm being short, so more than willing to come back at another time when soon to do it, but just some heads up. But the points I'm making here is that there has to be, I would argue, and I'm open to any and all pushback on this, but a certain level of mediated hierarchy. Now, what do I mean by that? Right? I have 2 kids, and it's very clear on very certain questions. Me and my wife, we're going to make the final decisions. But we leave things open to debate. Like our kids will debate us to hell, and sometimes it's annoying as hell. But they are subject to debate, and that's been a principle that we've tried to uphold, as best we can. It's not like we're not challenging it, but I think that's critical because there's certain pieces of like, look, I can't let you put your finger in that socket because I know what that's actually going to do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Right? Like we're just going to stop there. You're not going to put your hand on top of the stove because I know what that's going to do, and I'm just going to stop you there. But if you want to find out, I can give you an illustration of what it potentially could do, so that it satisfies your curiosity. But it's not about, like, the thing is, I'm coming with a verified knowledge on behalf of my age and experience, but I have to justify that knowledge. You don't just take me at my word. Can you demonstrate what you mean? Right? Can you demonstrate it? Which is a different orientation, just like, well, just do as I say, which is kind of how I was raised, right? But there is going to be a way in which, in terms of knowledge exchange, that there's a reflection upon expertise, but it's just a reflection. And I think the principles of the university that you want to create is to say, I'm coming with what I know. It is not absolute. It is not all knowing. It's subject to interpretation, but I can demonstrate certain, elements of a level of competency that I want to share with you, and then open it up in such a way, the pedagogy, open it up in such a way that folks can then also share, right? And make time and space for that sharing as a critical part of what this university, I would hope, would be about. And I'm stressing that because I'll just again cite from Jackson experience what I mean by literacy, right, and the challenges around that. Most of the folks that we work with, if you were to test them, their reading levels like between third and fifth grade, right? Just because of the nature of how apartheid functions in Mississippi, right? But if you want to ask them, how to build a car or how to farm, they got PhDs in that from direct experience. So it's just a matter of what are we trying to get out and who is the expert when, right? Because there's certain things I can't do, was never trained to do. And it's knowing when to kind of take a back seat to, like, you have the experience and accumulated knowledge here. I'm going to be the student and I humbly accept that. And I'm here to learn and to share, what I have and to share it with you on an equal basis. But it's not to presume that just because they can't read a word on the paper that they don't come with some value or they don't come with some knowledge. Everybody comes with some value and knowledge, and that needs to be a core principle of if you're going to have something open to the community where the community can trust you and learns to trust you over time. Like, that type of exchange is going to be necessary, and that kind of principle is going to be necessary. Bazuli, I think you had your hand up if I saw. Okay.
Oh, do we have something on the Zoom? Sorry. Is somebody on the Zoom? Is there somebody on the Zoom that's got their hand up? Sorry. Did I miss that? No, we're doing okay.
I thought I saw, it caught me off the eye. I thought I saw a hand raised.
No, sorry, that was just a pencil which I had in my hand.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me see. How to overcome the kind of bureaucratic power. A lot more to say on that, but I'll go back to what I was offering before and maybe make it more stated. Like, you're gonna need community power to overcome all the other forms of institutional power that'll be arrayed against you. Particularly from the in this case, like if you're thinking about Colombia, the trustees have a tremendous amount of power, right? And that's going to have to be mediated and broken. I think one thing that I would suggest trying is they have, you might think of them as having a unified set of interests, but I would wager that they're not of a unified mind. And so there may be a minority, I'm sure, who might be open and interested in doing something like this, right? And a clear vision may win them over. And I'm just going to go into just straight up Machiavellian politics here. It's like at some times you got to figure out how to what I was saying earlier. What are the cracks? Where are they? Find out where they're not united. And I'm sure there's some fundamental questions that they're not, and then create a wedge. To at the very least split them in their power and to get some to see that their interest is more in line with extending something to the community than it is, kind of holding on to a particular reins of power, and that they won't necessarily lose out from actually, opening up, right? So it should be a kind of an orientation that the more you share, the more bounty you actually will have, which is different than a hoarding, accumulation type orientation. And there was another point that relates to this kind of the point of privilege. Again, this is where kind of a realist in me exists, and I'm just going to share it with you, right? I take the world for what it is. I just don't accept it, right? And that's a particular stance, with some nuance to it. I hope that people understand, like, I deal with the fact that Elon Musk is a billionaire, right? That is a reality I can't ignore. I don't have to accept that he should remain one, though, right? And I need to then, like, well, how do I create systems and processes of the political movement that changes this dynamic, right? And then this, I think, goes to a particular point of privilege. And one of the things I often argue with, with some of the particular, younger white folks that come to work with us, we're gonna check your privilege, and I don't hate on you for how you were born, right? And then I want you to be conscious of what your privilege is, so that you can learn how to undo it, how to dismantle it, right? And to put that in the service of humanity by undoing it, right? By challenging, and that would go with, you know, along race lines, along caste lines, along gender lines, along sexuality lines, right? Like, I'm not going to be mad at you with how you were born, but what you do, right, in the choices that you make, you are responsible for those, and I want you to be in alignment with the broader interests of humanity. So I need you to make some conscious and intentional choices to undo your privilege, and that comes in many different forms. Because I've also, you know, been very strategic, try to be very strategic within the context. And I'll cite this, you know, as an example. You know, there's a tech guy who was working with us, you know, who, you know, brilliant in his own field, got into the tech world at a particular time. One of his people became a billionaire, and he's like, you know, doing some stuff with AI, and he's trying to get back all his money. We got a chance to, you know, or a portion of his money. We had a chance to sit down and have a real conversation after building a relationship. And, you know, he was having a conversation around, you know, about what to do with his privilege. And I said, look, let me be real and candid with you. I appreciate where you're coming from your conversation, but there, you know, you being a white male, heterosexual white male who's operating this AI world, I have an interest in making sure AI does not destroy, you know, like the working class and black and brown people. You are in those rooms. I can't be in those rooms. So what I need you to do as my ally in this case is use your privilege to be in there and to fight for all the damn things that we need, and don't duck away from that. So in this case, I need you to use what you've accrued to the advantage of a larger argument in the political movement. But it's to recognize what your positionality is and how it could be used. So it's like we want you to be answerable to our community and be accountable to our community, and outline very specifically what those things means relative to this particular task, but also relative to our community. But I'm like, I don't want to take you in this moment strategically. I don't want to take you away from that room. I actually want you to go in and dominate that damn space, so they don't create something, you know, that we end up with Skynet. For those of you who know Terminator, like, I don't want that. So I need you to be in there fighting to make sure that that doesn't happen. And that requires you to use your privilege in this particular case strategically and effectively. So, you know, all these things come with nuance, I would say, y'all, you know, and that's to be clear about that. And I'm relating that, you know, to you all as students at Columbia. Yes, you have the degree of privilege. The question is now, what are you going to do with it?
Right. Thanks, Kali. That was amazing. And we are so fascinated by the project at Goddard College. We're going to be following this really closely and supporting it as best we can, because this is exactly what we'd like to think of the future of our own university would be like. I mean, it's fascinating and brilliant that you guys are trying that project. And so we're gonna be following it. And I think we are all just so grateful for you having joined us and shared your insights and your knowledge and your theoretical and practical brilliance. So I think everybody's gonna really join me.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Keep awareness.
Thank you so much, Callie. And yeah, and I'll be in touch with you offline about this project.
Right on.
More. All right. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you
Callie.
all.
Thanks.
All right.
Peace. All right. Well, I think maybe we'll continue the conversation now a little bit offline. Maybe, I think, does that make sense? Yeah. So I think we'll say goodbye to everybody who's on the Zoom, and thank everybody for joining us. I see Kiara just came on. I hope you're doing well, Kiara. Thanks again for joining us for the rescue at sea, and Max and a lot of other people. Amina, thanks for joining us. Basuli, Fonda, thanks for joining us. Okay. All right. So I think what we'll do is we'll continue the conversation offline. Thank you, Kiana, for helping organize everything. And thank you all. And, you know, this is the last 1313. So, all right. See you all.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Of the entirety of the.
No, for the week.